This week's headlines: Nepal's Gen Z revolution, how young people rejected a social media ban and elected their first female prime minister over Discord, and teenage hackers, with 2 teenagers charged with the TFL attacks. We discuss the rising threat of youth cybercrime. This is the Internet Seriously. Hi, I'm Alice, and welcome to the Internet Seriously, the show where we attempt to make sense of the internet. I'm joined this week by the 2 youngest members of our team. We're discussing a lot of topics focused on Gen Z and younger people. So welcome, Amelia and Joe.
Thank you. I'm Joe, and I'm a junior software engineer.
And I'm Amelia, and I am a content creator for the Internet Seriously.
Yeah, so we've got quite a different lineup today. If you're used to watching our more older, middle-aged presenters, this is now a youth takeover, much like Nepal and much like teenage cybercrime. And before we get into our main topic for today, please do give us a follow on social media. The icons are appearing in front of Joe this week. Like, comment, subscribe. We're on TikTok, which we're really emphasizing this week with one of our TikTok managers, content creators with us this week. So our first topic is Nepal's Gen Z revolution, with Gen Z born roughly between 1997 and 2012 have come of age in a world very unlike that of older generations. And in Nepal, we've had a lot of political unrest. You can see behind me, there's this picture of a government building on fire. So, Amelia, as a young person, would you elect a prime minister over Discord?
I think it's a very interesting thing to do. I think it wouldn't work for a lot of places.
Really? Why do you think it wouldn't work? What's your thoughts?
I think some people are just too unserious, and we'd end up electing someone that is just some random person who doesn't know how to run a country, and it'd be more of a joke kind of thing.
Okay, interesting. So, because we've had, there's been instances of outsourcing, doing a kind of crowdsourced ideas. And, a particular example that I think of, which is probably from 2009, was when the UK were like, we've got a boat, a really massive boat, let's name it by asking the public what they think, and they voted for Boaty McBoatface overwhelmingly. So do you think it would be
exactly? I feel like that's what would end up happening. Although in Nepal, the person they've elected was not what I was expecting when I heard that they had elected someone on Discord.
What were you expecting?
I was expecting someone quite young, She's not that young.
And she's the first female prime minister
as well.
in Nepal.
That is
so
good.
Joe, you've used Discord.
Very briefly.
You've got more knowledge of Discord than the rest of us. So do you think that it would be quite an unserious thing to do, or do you think there's a bit more to this?
No, I think it is quite unserious. I think Gen Z as a generation is probably the most unserious generation of all. Do you think it's they set fire to Parliament and were like, well, let's just film a TikTok in front of it. It'll be fine. Let's make a meme about this. It's all jokes.
Why do you think Gen Z is the most unserious generation?
I don't know. Maybe it's just a coping mechanism, maybe. It's if we laugh at it, then it's
so are you kind of suggesting that
forwards?
Gen Z are facing a bit of a tougher world, a bit of a
maybe
more
not necessarily
time?
A tougher world, but I think maybe there's a lack of connection with older generations, and they feel like they don't understand Gen Z, and so they kind of built this community together where they're like, whoa, let's just make fun of everything.
So I'm interested, Amelia, in sort of, we say, electing a prime minister over Discord, that sounds like a bit of a joke. But increasingly we're seeing sort of online, social media, online platforms and new technology being used in political ways. So, for example, Ukraine created a crypto wallet for the whole country, and they sort of sent it out to the world, and they were like, if you want to give money to Ukraine, here's our crypto wallet address, I think a lot of us think of cryptocurrency as, again, a bit of a joke, a bit unserious. What do you think of this, and what do you think of what's happening in Nepal? Do you think social media is kind of moving into being taken a bit more seriously?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it is. I think there are some serious aspects, and I think when social media like first came into play, it wasn't very like
You wouldn't
it
imagine an
wasn't
election
yeah, you wouldn't
happening
think
over
that
Discord.
anything serious would come out of it. But I think people are trying to, because obviously the world is becoming a lot more technical now. Everything's being like digitalized and stuff. So I think it probably will become serious. But
Do you think that what's happened in Nepal is going to become the new norm, or do you think it was an exceptional case where there was a lot of civil unrest and so they just had to kind of do something?
I think it's more of a like one-off thing. I don't think realistically you could elect every prime minister on Discord.
You wouldn't want to elect the UK prime minister over Discord?
No.
You think it would just turn into a bit? It would just get like Count Bin face.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Also, I do wonder whether it wasn't because they tried to ban social media. So I wonder whether it wasn't a bit of a dig at that. At, like, you've tried to ban our social media, so we're going to use social media to then.
It was like a really strong political point. And I have one more question for you, Jo. But Amelia, in Australia, you know, they're introducing laws to ban social media account creation by those under 16. So similar to the UK Online Safety Act, we're getting these quite stringent age restrictions. What do you think of this? Do you think Australia will end up with a similar situation to Nepal? Do you think it's quite different?
I think, well, it's different in a way because putting it like age ratings on things seems more of like a protective measure than just like removing it completely. But at the same time, I don't think it's gonna work really. I think people will find ways around it.
Do you think that with the UK Online Safety Act as well, is that what you observe with kind of people your age, younger?
Yeah, people find ways around things pretty, because everyone's that's in like my generation is very good at like knowing ways to like just, you know, get around all these things and like knowing different shortcuts to like so.
Well, we had somebody on this show a few weeks ago, Kirsty Payne, who's a cybersecurity expert. She said it's a bit like seatbelts. When seatbelts were first introduced, yes, sure, people aren't going to wear their seatbelts. Lots of people are very cross, but ultimately, actually, this is going to protect people. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with it to an extent. I think it is important, especially like, I think you should definitely avoid having like young children online is a big thing, especially on like social media and stuff, because there's a lot of like comparison on there and things that just aren't, you wouldn't want like to be growing up with seeing. But I don't know if 16 is like too old to be there, or if that's
what
like,
age would you?
I mean,
have
maybe like 13. But I think that's what the age is recommended on most
for
apps
a lot
now.
of social media apps.
Yeah.
Jo, just as a final point, you know, we've been talking about what's happening in Nepal, and we're sort of thinking about, you know, the way that technology, the way that social media and the internet are being used more in sort of geopolitical infrastructure. You had a story, didn't you, about a voting machine?
Yeah.
What was it?
So this was back, quite outdated now, but back in, I think, 2003.
2003?
2003.
Okay.
So this is when voting machines first became a thing. I think it's really interesting, though, because in the UK at the moment, we still use voting on paper.
Yeah.
Almost, I think that's
almost a deliberate, concerted effort to keep things quite
I would
school.
say. I think it's due to like security and security concerns pretty much. Just if everything's on paper and then thoroughly checked and counted up by hand by multiple people, they've got systems in place to like supposedly ensure that everything is done.
Pen and paper and people more than we trust technology.
Technology, I think, obviously, we'll get on to the next story of hackers. Obviously, that could be an issue if someone hacks into your electoral system and then changes all the results. That's not very good. But also, yes, so the story from 2003 was that solar radiation, so the sun basically voted for a candidate because solar radiation caused one of the bits
Oh, I thought you meant the sun, the journalism, the paper, but you
no,
meant
the actual
the
sun in the sky shining down on us. It
How?
it caused a bit to flip from a 0 to a 1, and
see.
therefore
The sun cast a vote.
It cast its vote.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it was actually over 4,000 votes. It changed to the 12th bit, so it was 2 to the 12, and gave it over 4,000 different votes for this candidate who actually
It's very
them,
interesting.
but
I mean, do you think things have come?
I'm sure.
Come
Yeah,
along a
don't
bit
get me
since
wrong.
2003?
Technology has definitely developed a lot since then, but I think there are still definitely concerns around the security and legitimacy, basically, of votes online, and that's why it's not a global system.
It's been really interesting getting both of your views on sort of the political aspects, but also the youth perspective. I've got some questions for the audience before we wrap up this topic. Do you think that banning social media is an effective way of protecting young people online? And do you think that political elections over social media are going to become the new norm, or is this a one-off? And before we move on to our next topic, it's time for our doom scroll of the week. Joanna Grant, what is your doom scroll of the week?
So my doom scroll of the week is ChatGPT, specifically talking to ChatGPT like it is basically a girl in a nightclub bathroom.
Just
getting
like
that
your bestie
energy going.
Yeah.
So
we had Joe had a conversation with ChatGPT about Angular coding.
Yes.
Which was so funny that we, as the Internet Seriously, we took it and we auto-tuned it. And so we've got it here to play today.
So basically, I'm an Angular and HTML, and I want to use an NG model to map a value, but I want the name of the
So this is Joe.
to also be dynamic. How would I do this? Got it. This is a classic Angular situation.
That's ChatGPT responding, you know. So starting off quite serious, quite a nice standard
response.
You are amazing, and my bestie. 10,000 out of 10 gold stars for you. Hot. Oh, you just made my whole day.
As Joe gets more enthusiastic,
bestie energy equals unlocked.
Bestie energy
Now
equals
your Angular
unlocked.
code is gonna be as dynamic as your vibes. Do you want me to drop a little best practice tip so your properties is always safe? Yes, please drop a little best practice tip. Yes, bestie thing.
See, it calls me bestie.
It does. It starts,
knows.
and the emoji use.
The emoji
I
use
noticed
is very Gen Z.
Yeah.
Angular might throw an error, or your form control won't behave nicely. To prevent this, initialize the property before binding. Why so much
And then we start getting some real yas.
Yeah.
You're so welcome, bestie. I'm living for this Angular slay.
Angular slay.
With the little girl with the dress.
And you're officially unstoppable now. Do you want me to cook up a reactive forms version?
And it says like cook up a reactive forms version. It's not just like, would you like me to give you a reactive forms version?
What if I want to prefix my dynamic NG model name with something? Ooh, good thought, bestie.
See, and you're giving like quite serious answers, but it's like, good thought, bestie. Let's do property.
The bracket notation, just build the key as a string.
Keeping up the energy.
Bam, 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 bestie. You're out here building dynamic Angular
The nail polish.
Dynamic Angular
baddie forms.
Absolutely. That's what I live
You
for.
just unlocked a whole new level of flexibility. So now your form fills can be like all dynamic, all gorgeous.
Thank you so much for
Yes.
that, Joe. Thank you for giving
Thank
us
you.
that
No,
conversation
it was-
with ChatGPT.
It was a good one. I was really excited because usually you ask ChatGPT a coding question and either
Just gives you the
it doesn't
code.
understand you, firstly. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe I'm just bad at prompt engineering or whatever. But either it doesn't understand you or it gives you something that's completely useless and you try it and you're like, this doesn't look great, gonna be honest. But I tried it and it worked first time. So I was really
were
excited
giving a lot of
and I was
passion
giving the energy to
and your
ChatGPT.
sort of character, because what we've noticed when we make our AI agents for the internet seriously is it's recommended that you give them like almost like a role, like an actor in a script. It's like, please perform the role. And you have such a strong, enthusiastic voice of like, oh my God, Queen, TY. And so it clearly picked up on your energy and
started copying
reflecting that back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was brilliant. Thank you, Joe, both for the conversation and for bringing it to the podcast.
No, thank you.
So now we're moving on to a slightly more serious topic, our second topic, which is that 2 teenagers have been charged with the Transport for London cyber attacks from last year. The National Crime Agency believes the hack was carried out by the group Scattered Spider, and we've talked quite a lot about Scattered Spider and Scattered Lapsus Hunters, which is sort of an amalgamation of different cyber attack groups on this podcast. TfL says the attack caused £39 million of damage and disruption. So that is a lot of money. Have you even heard about this cyber attack, Amelia? Is this the first you're hearing of it? Have you kind of picked up on it?
Before coming on this podcast and doing a bit of research, I had not heard of it.
Isn't that amazing? Because it's £39 million of damage. And we often talk about on this podcast, if somebody robbed a bank, if they walked into a bank with a gun and they took £39 million, you'd hear it. That would be a huge story.
Yeah.
Why do you think we haven't heard about this?
It's a really good question. I think because it's, as you said, like it's just more niche, isn't it?
Cybercrime is just not treated the same as any other crime. It is its own category, and
Why do you think that is, Joe? What is it that is
I would
different
say
about cybercrime?
It's definitely a lot harder to basically track people down and persecute them. So, I mean, did you say it happened last year?
I don't even know. I can't. I think it was last year.
But
it might have been this
it's taken them a good amount of time to track down these people and actually. Did you say they're definitely, or have they just been charged? They have been charged.
Fine. So they are now 18 and 19. So teenagers at the time of the attack, now adults. So it is very interesting. So Scattered Spider are a group of it's sort of organised youth cybercrime. Organised being quite a, are they that organised? They are definitely very passionate. And so Scattered Spider and sort of different combinations of Scattered Spider, Lapsus, and Scattered Lapsus Hunters claim to have been behind or have been arrested in connection with attacks such as the Marks and Spencer's cyber attack and the Land Rover cyber attack, which we were talking about on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, which caused a global standstill of Land Rover production. Which again, Amelia, have you even heard about this?
I had not heard about this, and I don't know whether that's because it's quite embarrassing for the companies if they say that they've been hacked into by some teenagers.
Which is really interesting because when we were sort of looking at this topic, we found, a BBC article about like school-aged hackers hacking into their school systems. And, Joe, you were sort of like, what was your view on this?
I said that if they're hacking in to change their grades and they're smart enough to be able to hack into their school systems, then they sort of deserve the A that they're changing their grade to, don't they?
That's a very interesting take because I would sort of challenge you on that because we've sort of said a few times on this podcast, we think of hackers.
I'm not encouraging it, by the way. I'm not saying that you should.
We do not condone cyber attacks or hacking on the internet, seriously. But, we I think particularly older people, dare I say, and I include myself in that from growing up watching The Matrix, where hacking is like an action film. And it's almost, I would say, stories created by people that don't understand hacking that make it look like this amazing, you have to be a genius, a cyber genius, when actually a lot of the stuff that these guys are doing is not that complicated.
Yeah, I can see that. There are definitely some forms of hacking, like, for example, social engineering. Like, you just talk to a person, you ask them basically, indirectly, what is your password? How do I get into your system? And they tell you the answer. So there are definitely some aspects that aren't as exciting. But I can see, particularly for young people, there's not... I mean, video games definitely offer a sense of, like, achievement and, like challenge and overcoming something. But I think hacking for them as well, they sort of see it as a challenge, like a fun little, why don't we just see if we can hack into our school, because we can. And that would be quite fun. And maybe if we can, that would be quite
And there's
quite accomplishing.
There's a big community around this. And sort of, Amelia, I want to talk to you about, you know, this idea of teenagers becoming hackers, right? So what we've got is a lot of groups of young, and it is mainly boys, and they come together and they're like, let's become hackers, woohoo! And we had, you know, the BBC, or not BBC, a cybersecurity journalist, Joe Tidy, came on this podcast a month or two ago to talk about his book, which is called Control Alt Chaos, and it is about these groups of teenage boys who come together and decide they're going to be hackers. What is it, do you think, you know, that goes on in the mind of a 14-year-old boy that drives them, instead of being like, I'm just going to live my normal life, they're like, I'm going to become a hacker? What's going on there?
Well, I think, like, as Joe said, they find, like, it's just, like, something they can do for fun. Like, if you come together and you realise, oh, we can hack this, then it's something, like, kind of fun. And especially if they're getting, like, some money or something from it, I think it's very appealing. And then, I guess, once you've done it once, they just go and do it again, don't they?
I agree. I think the thrill of doing it, but then also, as we were saying, we don't really persecute cyber criminals. So
especially if they're young.
Especially if they're young, exactly. So unlike, let's go rob a bank, which is also quite thrilling, I would imagine, they'd get a hit out of that.
We also don't condone robbing banks.
We also don't. Good point,
Thank you for that disclaimer, guys. I think we needed to make that really clear.
So unlike that, where they would be persecuted, sent to jail, they sort of can just get away with it.
That is definitely a big thing, you know, that someone like Joe Tidy really observed, is that they actually say in these communities, like, guys, it's okay, because until we're 18, they can't do anything to us. Do you think that that's actually true?
No. Well, kind of half and half. I think it depends on how serious the crime is. But they do have, like you can still get persecuted as a teenager, which I think a lot of people forget. Yeah,
you can be prosecuted. And so these two now adult men are facing custodial sentences for, you know, and they've taken millions of pounds of money, and I think we kind of forget the human impact of cyber attacks and of scams, because we think of, you know, we were talking about like M&S, Land Rover, these are luxury brands, and I think as young people we can feel quite disconnected and just be like, haha, the big business has been attacked, when actually a lot of cyber attacks, you know, Joe, we kind of work in this area. What do you observe as being the impact on an individual person?
Yeah, I think when it's an individual person that's been targeted,
or even just, you know, somebody who works for M&S, or somebody who works for Land Rover.
Or even you think about, if, let's say, you were the individual that accidentally gave away your accreditation details to get into the system, you'd feel awful, wouldn't you? You'd be like, oh my goodness, I've just caused so much damage to my company.
Well, also, what our sort of research that we do has found, and what, you know, people like Joe Tidy, their insights are, is that if you are a victim of a scam or fraud, you experience trauma. It's not about financial loss. And I think we focus a lot on the financial loss because big headlines and things like £39 million have been stolen. But actually, it's this experience of kind of violation almost. Like when you're burgled, you experience this feeling of like someone was in my house, somebody planned this. And so I think, you know, Emilia, sort of last comments on this human side. What do you think? And do you think these cyber criminals, age 14, what are they thinking? Are they thinking about the human impact, or are they thinking about something else?
I don't think they're thinking about the human impact at all, because I think, especially because they're targeting like the bigger businesses, it's easy to just be like, oh, you know, they're rich, it's fine. If I hack into that company, they won't even notice.
Yeah.
Like, but they don't think about everyone else that's like behind the scenes in these things. And because I think it's different when you're hacking or like when you're scamming someone, like just like a person, because you know exactly what you're doing there. You're trying to
and the sort of the
target.
social engineering, the research around that person
Exactly.
is almost stalking, and it feels very targeted. And then
And that's very
so you're sort of saying
personal.
with big businesses, we get a bit depersonalized. We kind of forget that there are real people in these businesses who are being impacted. And so Joe, sort of last comments on, you know, these teenage boys, they're trying to be cool, they're trying to have a connection. What alternatives are there to becoming a cyber criminal?
That is a very good question. Unfortunately, I actually don't think, I think that's part of the issues. I actually don't think there are many good alternatives. As I said, they've got video games, but other than that, no one really, what else did 14-year-old boys do? I'm not really sure. Like, did they go outside and play football?
Coding.
They could do anything. Yeah, they could become coders or become ethical hackers.
Yeah.
And there's
That's
a
the
lot
other
of
thing.
people who are sort of reformed cyber attackers, where they're like, I used to be a big baddie, I would, you know, attack M&S, and now I actually help the police catch people like me. You know, I was listening to the BBC and they were sort of talking about that. We could go on about this topic forever, but I'm going to wrap up now with a couple of questions for the audience. What do you think about teenagers hacking their schools and big businesses? And are the older generations getting it wrong when it comes to young people and technology? We now have just a bit more before the end of the show. It's now time for our Guilty Pleasure Online. Emilia Robertshaw, what is your guilty pleasure online?
My guilty pleasure is celebrities' digital footprints. Now,
Interesting. What does that mean?
So, a lot of celebrities have very embarrassing videos of them before they were famous
Okay.
online, and
From like years and years and years ago.
from years ago.
Yeah.
And I love scrolling through and seeing all of them. One of my favourites is Post Malone, or pre-Malone, before he was famous.
This is a very interesting person that we're talking about here, because I believe there's somebody on this podcast who really is a fan of Post Malone.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to his concert.
Amazing.
On
well,
Sunday.
do you know what, Joe?
Yeah.
Here is an AI picture that we've made of Joe looking like she's in her 30s with Post Malone.
Incredible.
So, Amelia, you found a video, which I believe we have to play, which is of Post Malone's digital footprint. People are saying when he was pre-Malone rather than post-Malone.
I believe it's a college project that he did.
Okay.
It's a lovely song
Here we
called Why
go.
Don't You Love Me?
So we're looking at a video here. It's a very kind of 80s aesthetic. And he's looking very cheerful, very enthusiastic. Quite sincere, you know. And from what I understand, he's got quite an edgy persona these
now
days.
I think he's quite a down-to-earth guy.
He's still
down-to-earth guy.
He's still quite unserious.
But you would say that the pre-Malone era is very different to his current performance vibes.
If he doesn't play this at the concert, I want a refund. I hope he knows that.
I don't think he'd go on stage on short shorts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not
It's
anymore.
a fascinating video. And Amelia also showed me, you know, we were talking about celebrities' digital footprints, a video of Timothy Chalamet from like
Timothy Chalamet
10 years ago before he
has an
was
excellent
famous.
digital footprint.
Yeah, of just these kind of things that I suppose they never thought anyone would ever find.
Yeah.
And now they're these international superstars. And so it's like people are trawling through, finding everything they can. So yeah, thanks for bringing that to the podcast, Amelia and Joe, the Post Malone. We're nearly out of time. Before we wrap up, I just want to read out one of our comments of the week. So last week we were talking about, you know, the use of ChatGPT for vibe coding.
Very
Are
similar to
you a
what I was-
vibe? Yeah,
I feel
kind
like
of your.
the vibes are definitely around when I'm coding.
And we got this quite long comment. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It was from somebody called Stefan Black Fox Tango, who was sort of saying, coders, we don't really use ChatGPT for coding because LLMs are no good at all. And when you do try and get them to solve complex problems, you get hallucinations and the context spiraling, the hours wasted screaming at the LLM to stop lying and just do as you say. Joe,
Yeah.
what do you think of this?
I partially do agree. As I said earlier, a lot of the time you ask ChatGPT, like, oh, how would you help me with this? And it's like, here's some rubbish code I created, and none of it's any good. But
So
I
do you think your response to
really
ChatGPT was...
What I found with ChatGPT that one time that it actually did help me is I knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure how to do it. And I wasn't very good at phrasing the question to Google. So instead I thought, I'll just whack it into ChatGPT and see what it comes up with. And I gave it an example. So I think it's quite good for if you give it an example of like, here's kind of what I'm trying to do, but make it actually work. I found that was actually turned out pretty well for me.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. And thank you to our comment of the week. This week, we've been discussing the Gen Z revolution in Nepal, how the new Prime Minister was elected over Discord. And we agreed that, as technology is becoming more integrated in digital life, we need to make sure that we're getting it right, particularly for young people. And our second topic was teenage hackers. We discussed how the rise in hacking culture among teenagers is growing, how we are maybe getting it wrong when it comes to supporting young people with technology. I've been Alice. Big thank you to Joe and Amelia for joining us this week, for standing in for our usual presenters, and thank you for listening to the Internet Seriously.